The fluorescent lights of the downtown bank branch hummed overhead as Margaret. Chen stood quietly in line, her weathered hands gripping a crumpled envelope containing her weekly grocery money. She didn't notice the expensive cologne that preceded him, or the Italian leather shoes that clicked impatiently behind her. She was too focused on remembering the numbers. Her late husband had made her memorize. 40 years ago, the account number she'd never written down because Henry always said the most important things should be kept in your heart, not on paper. "This is ridiculous," a voice boomed behind her. "I have a conference call in 20 minutes. Margaret glanced back apologetically at the tall man in the charcoal suit, his Rolex catching the light as he checked it for the third time in as many minutes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I'll be quick. I just want to see my balance." The man, Marcus Whitmore, senior partner at Whitmore and Associates, let out a laugh that turned heads throughout the bank. "You're holding up the line to check your balance? Lady, there's an ATM right outside. There's an app for that." Margaret's cheeks flushed pink. "I don't have a smartphone, sir, and the ATM confuses me. I just need to ask the teller." "Next!" the teller called. Marcus stepped forward before Margaret could move, his polished confidence cutting through the space like a knife. "I'm sorry, but I have an urgent transaction. Surely you can help me first? I'm depositing a rather substantial check." He pulled out a slip of paper with such flourish that everyone could see the number. 2.4 million. The young teller, barely out of college, looked nervously between Marcus and Margaret. "Sir, this lady was actually—" "It's all right," Margaret said quietly, stepping aside. "I can wait." Marcus didn't thank her. He was already sliding his identification across the counter, explaining in unnecessarily loud detail about his latest real estate acquisition. Margaret stood to the side, still clutching her envelope, her eyes distant. She was thinking about Henry again, about how he'd always told her that money was just paper, but kindness was currency that never lost its value. Behind Marcus, the line grew longer. A young mother with a crying baby shifted from foot to foot. An elderly veteran leaned heavily on his cane. A college student kept checking her watch, clearly late for class. The transaction took 15 minutes. Marcus made sure everyone knew about the private investment, opportunities he was pursuing, the yacht club membership he was considering, the summer home in the Hamptons. When he finally finished, he turned to leave without a word to Margaret, who had waited patiently the entire time. "Next!" the teller called, and Margaret shuffled forward. "Hello, dear," Margaret said warmly. "I'm sorry, I know this is probably silly, but I just want to see my balance. I don't understand those machines outside, and I like to make sure everything's in order." The teller, whose name tag read Sarah, smiled with genuine warmth. "Of course, ma'am. Not silly at all. Can I have your account number?" Margaret recited the numbers slowly, the same way she'd been doing for 4 decades. Sarah typed them in, and her expression changed instantly. Her eyes widened slightly, and she looked up at Margaret with new attention. "One moment, Mrs. Chen," Sarah said, her voice suddenly professional in a different way. "Let me get my manager." Margaret's heart sank. "Oh no, is something wrong? Did someone steal my money?" "No, ma'am, nothing like that, just—" "Please wait one moment." Marcus was halfway to the door when curiosity made him glance back. Something about the sudden activity around the old woman intrigued him. The manager, a distinguished man in his 50s, had emerged from his office and was now speaking quietly with Sarah while looking at the computer screen. "Mrs. Chen," the manager said, extending his hand. "I'm David Richardson. It's an honor to have you here today. I see this is your first visit to this particular branch?" "Yes," Margaret said nervously. "We usually went to the branch on 5th Street, but it closed down." "Did I do something wrong?" "Not at all. I just wanted to personally verify. Would you like to conduct your business in my office? Given your account status, we can offer you more privacy." "Account status?" Margaret looked confused. "I just want to see my balance." "Is that a problem?" David smiled gently. "No problem at all, ma'am. But perhaps you'd be more comfortable discussing it privately." Marcus had stopped walking entirely now. Other people in line were watching too, sensing something unusual unfolding. Margaret looked around at all the faces watching her and felt suddenly self-conscious. "I don't need privacy. I just want to know my balance. I need to make sure I have enough for groceries this week and my granddaughter's birthday present. David exchanged a glance with Sarah, then nodded. Of course. He turned the monitor slightly so Margaret could see it, though not so far that everyone else could read it clearly. Margaret squinted at the screen, then blinked. That can't be right. I assure you it is, Mrs. Chen. But that says... Margaret's voice trailed off as she leaned closer, her hand reaching up to touch the screen as if it might be a mirage. That says $47 million. The bank went completely silent. Marcus's mouth fell open. Margaret shook her head. There's been a mistake. My husband and I, we saved money. We were careful, but we were teachers. We never made more than $40,000 a year between us. This must be someone else's account. David's smile was kind. Mrs. Chen, your husband was Henry Chen, correct? He passed away 18 months ago? Margaret's eyes filled with tears at the mention of Henry's name. Yes. Did he ever mention his investments to you? Henry? Margaret almost laughed. Henry clipped coupons. He reused tea bags. He wore the same winter coat for 30 years. He also, David said gently, was apparently an extraordinarily gifted investor. According to our records, he started with small amounts in the 1960s, very small amounts, $20 here, $50 there. He invested in a little company called Microsoft in 1986. He bought Apple stock when everyone thought the company was finished. Amazon, Google, Netflix. He had modest positions in all of them. Purchased decades ago and never touched. Margaret sat down heavily in a chair someone quickly provided. Henry never said anything. We lived in the same small house for 45 years. We bought store-brand cereal. I made his shirts. Why would he... There's a letter, David said, pulling up another document. He left instructions that it should be read to you if you ever came to check the balance. He updated it every year. Would you like to hear it? Margaret nodded, unable to speak. David cleared his throat and began to read. My dearest Margaret, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone and you've finally come to check on our savings. I know you're probably angry that I never told you about this money. Here's the truth, my love. I watched my parents lose everything in the Depression. I swore I'd never let that happen to you. But I also watched money change people, make them mean and suspicious and afraid. You were never any of those things. You gave to every charity, helped every neighbor, loved every student. You were rich in all the ways that mattered. I was afraid this money might change you, might burden you, might make you worry about things that didn't matter. I wanted you to keep being you, the woman who found joy in sunrise walks and library books and teaching children to read. The money was always just insurance, just protection. But now it's yours, and I hope you'll use it to keep doing what you've always done, making the world a little kinder, a little softer, a little more like you. There wasn't a dry eye in the bank. The young mother was crying. The veteran had removed his cap and held it to his chest. Even Sarah was wiping her eyes. Marcus stood frozen, remembering the woman he'd pushed aside, the woman he'd laughed at for not understanding ATMs, for holding up the line, for just wanting to check her balance. Margaret was sobbing quietly, her shoulders shaking. He always took care of me, she whispered. Even now, when she finally looked up, her eyes found Marcus across the bank. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor. Instead, she stood and walked over to him. You have a conference call, she said simply. I hope it went well. Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry. I was incredibly rude to you. I had no right. You were in a hurry, Margaret said. We all get that way sometimes. She paused, then added, my Henry used to say that how we treat people when we're rushed tells us who we really are. He said it's easy to be kind when everything's going your way. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. When was the last time someone had treated him like a human being who could do better, rather than just a jerk who deserved condemnation? He sounds like he was a wise man. He was, Margaret said, and smiled through her tears. He really was. As Marcus left the bank that day, he found himself thinking about the old woman with $47 million, who'd waited patiently while he'd boasted about his $2.4 million. He thought about Henry Chen, who'd been wealthier than Marcus might ever be, but who'd worn the same coat for 30 years. He thought about what it meant to be rich, really rich in the ways that mattered. That evening, Marcus called his assistant and cleared his schedule for the following day. Then he called his mother. whom he hadn't spoken to in 3 weeks despite living 20 minutes away. And then he sat in his expensive apartment, surrounded by expensive things, and wondered when he'd stopped measuring wealth in anything other than numbers on a screen. The next morning, Margaret returned to the bank with a list. She wanted to set up college funds for every student in her late husband's last 3 classes. She wanted to endow a scholarship for teachers. She wanted to pay off the medical debts of everyone in her church. She wanted to save the library that was facing closure. "I just want to see my balance," she'd said. And in doing so, she'd shown a bank full of strangers what it really meant to be wealthy. Not in dollars, but in grace, in dignity, in the quiet accumulation of kindness that compounds over a lifetime.